called the stronger derivatives thing in her committee, stronger derivatives legislation. On the surface of that, that would seem terrific. The problem is that we have a senator who's been basically taking money from these very same people, who is putting an amendment up before her primary. And honestly, we really had to ask ourselves, what do you give the chance of that amendment lasting and her continuing to advocate if she wins her primary? And the answer to us, in our respect, was very little chance. And that's why we went ahead with this. The thing on Social Security is here, there's a couple of, the biggest problem right now that we're facing, and I suspect everybody else is facing, is the number of challenges that we have right now. After 8 years of this country being run into the ground by this administration and by big business, frankly, we are faced with climate change, the healthcare, the banking reform, and here we have this thing that's going on, and it's hard for us to have the bandwidth to say, well, what are we going to do about Social Security if it isn't happening right now? The silver lining here is that we actually have been down this road with Social Security in 2005 when President Bush decided that he should privatize Social Security to the tune of adding $2.5 trillion to the deficit and subsidizing the banking industry. And that is something that is not like we're just going to roll it right out again and we can do something. But if we end up with a lame duck situation, particularly after the election, we've got not only the know-how, and again, other groups in this too, but also the resources and some of the organizational tools that we can bring right back out again to address this issue. Because you're right, there is a lot of stuff, and not just this deficit commission, there's a lot of other stuff that's being done under the table. We have healthcare regulations being implemented right now, formed right now for this healthcare bill, and the people that are out there having the most input are the health insurance lobbyists. And that really gives me a lot of nervous. I have a lot of actually confidence in Kathleen Sebelius because of what she did as governor of Kansas, but it speaks to the environment that we're operating in about trying to be in too many places at once against a well-resourced group of people.
All right, I want to address a couple of things that were mentioned, and I think it's really important. The Lincoln Amendment came about because of Bill Halter. She would have never, ever in a million years put together a strong derivatives amendment if she hadn't gotten a primary challenge. She did it before. She got the primary challenge, and all of a sudden, look at that. She became a progressive, right? So that's point number one. Point number two is, don't believe for a second. The minute that they already had a plan, this is very important. The night after the primary, they had a plan to take the derivatives amendment off of that legislation. In fact, they executed that plan. Chris Dodd, that night, took it out of the legislation. Why? Because he figured she's either going to win, in which case, okay, well, then we don't have to worry about being progressive and all that nonsense. That was obviously a joke. Or she's going to lose, in which case she no longer has power, and so we're going to just do that favor to the banks. Here's what they didn't count on. She tied, right? So she had to go to a runoff, which was a great thing. Now, the thing is, everything's a Pyrrhic victory. None of the victories ever last for progressives. So, well, here's why. So she goes to the runoff, so Don sees, oh my God, wait, our original plan didn't work. So that night he takes her amendment out of the legislation. The next morning he catches a lot of heat, he has to put it back in. And he put it back in, great, and just like we told you. I predicted it on the show, and it happened exactly. You know, because once you understand how politics works, you see the game they're running, right? Now, but what's going to happen? It's not going to stay in the bill. I guarantee it. Right here, everybody write it down. Lincoln's amendment will not stay in that bill. Why? There's things called managers' amendments, and there's a committee when the House and the Senate get together on conference. By that time, because it's over today, one way or another, Blanche Lincoln's situation will have been resolved, and she won't have to pretend anymore. So then they will strip that amendment. So it's gone. Okay? That's why we lose all the battles. Here's another reason why we lose all the battles. I want to bring it back to your deficit commission. We don't have a progressive president. We have a center-right president. Look, he has co-opted in the worst possible ways the right-wing positions. So he says right before the biggest offshore drilling disaster in history, I'm for offshore drilling! And he said, you Republicans, you're loving it now? And no, they don't love you. They're never going to love you. They're still going to call you a Maoist, socialist, etc., etc. And you just stepped in it. And I went, when he said I'm for offshore drilling, before they even started doing the energy supposed negotiations on the bill, I went ballistic. And I said, I mean, at best, you just gave away the queen before you started negotiating. You said, okay, I'll give you whatever you want. Okay, now let's negotiate. Okay, but that's the best case scenario. That's assuming that he's not in on it. Okay, and then everybody gave me heat. You know, not everybody, but a lot of people. Daily Kos, Obama lovers thought that I don't like Obama enough, and that I'm a bad guy, and I don't understand his brilliance. What happened to his brilliance now, right? And so on the Deficit Commission, we're in a lot of trouble, look, Jim is right. Social Security is the one thing that's we're the best at. I mean, that's the one thing we beat Bush on, and the only thing we beat Bush on. When he said, let's privatize Social Security, everybody said, come again? Right? And no, I don't want to lose my Social Security. Now, the problem is, they do a Deficit Commission with Obama's stamp on it. And then Obama comes out saying, let's cut Social Security. Then how are we going to win?
So, just to add slightly, we do have a problem with respect to the Deficit Commission for the reasons that Cenk just said. The fact that it has the Obama stamp of approval on it, although technically we don't know what it's going to say, all signs are that it's going to say that we need to cut the programs that keep the most vulnerable people in our society able to eat things other than cat food. Now, this is a relatively rare instance in which we actually have the potential to stir up real outrage among the American public. By and large, we haven't been particularly good at that, but having an army of little old ladies marching on Washington, D.C. with cans of cat food would probably send a message. And this is an instance in which that's a real possibility, and that we ought to be organizing not just the think tank folks to refute why this is a bad idea from a substantive policy perspective, but also all of the people who are going to be affected by this, for whom it is horrifying. The idea that we're not going to have hedge fund managers taxed at the same rates as everyone else, because Lord knows we wouldn't want the people pulling down $400 or $600 million a year to pay more than 15% in taxes. But we think that people who are barely getting by right now have too much if they can afford to eat more than cat food or ramen noodles is ridiculous.
I just wanted to add a point that in cases like this, if we remember back to after the Massachusetts election, the talk around town and on the airwaves was that healthcare was dead. That this was a period of time where we couldn't get anything done. You could think of it almost as a lame period. And that everything we worked on for the last year, specifically with the public option, was moot. But what we did at the PCCC was we identified members of Congress that we could give tools to and help train the way to organize with grassroots groups so we could have a very rapid response. And this was the poll list letter where we very quickly garnered hundreds of signatures on a letter saying that they supported the public option, and used organizing tools where we could have our members then have direct input to other members to encourage them to get on the letter. I wanted to return to a point that was made earlier about how do we build an incentive program for members of Congress. That's something we've been doing already at the PTRIP, where we go and we meet with members and we say, if you do the right thing and you be bold on this particular action, whether it's the public option, whether it's Wall Street accountability, whatever it is, whether it's the Deficit Commission, we can then in turn say, for the work that you will do with our members, that will hear about it, that will organize with you, we can turn around and ask them to chip into your campaign. And we did this with Phyllis, and we did this with Bennett, where we raised tens of thousands of dollars in the first run, right after they pitched in on the public option fight. So I think we can build a low-dollar grassroots coalition that will reward folks for doing the right thing and standing up against corporate money.
I hate to say it, but did we win on that?
No. But I will say that I think that you remember that there were folks that were saying healthcare was going to be off the table entirely, but we had to scrap the entire.
We did, Phil.
Right.
No, look, don't get me. I don't want anyone to get me wrong. I think they do fabulous work. I really do, and I think it's very important because you've got to set up that side. And so I don't want to be Bob Humbug about it. I love what you do. We didn't win on the public option, and I'm afraid that Bennett was playing this, right? And so I get a little afraid of that, right? And so people said, oh, we might not get a healthcare bill. I asked. I said from the minute they started that process, of course you're going to have a healthcare bill, because there's no way these people are walking out without at least pretending they get something. The question is what's in the bill, and if you look at what's in the bill, it's a disaster. This will be the same thing as financial reform. It's an iceberg that we're going to crash into in 6 months to 3 years.
So once again, a mild caveat from this end of the table, which is just, it is important not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are bad faith actors in Congress. There are members of both the House and the Senate who put corporate interests above the interests of the people they're supposed to represent. That is absolutely a problem, and setting up really aggressive accountability mechanisms for them, regardless of what party they claim to affiliate with, is a constructive thing. But it is also important that we understand that we can't say every member of Congress is bad. We can't say we're not going to ally, we're not going to provide rewards, we're going to write them all off, because they are the policy-making mechanism for the country. So if you don't find some constructive way to create and work with allies in Congress, then your opportunity to affect policy vanishes altogether. So there is that. It's two sides of the coin. We have to have both, as my son would put it, the Scooby snacks and the whacking the dog on the nose of the newspaper.
For me? Yeah, oh, hi. I have two questions. First of all, Cenk, I think the wolf pack sounds like a good idea, but what do you think about how would you combat the notion that you would be promoting a narrative that there's a fracture in the progressive movement? Surely would emerge. And my second question, well, you want to do that first and then come back? Or?
Yeah, that was real simple. Yes, there is.
Could you repeat the question?
He said, how would you, if you do the wolf pack, how do you deal with the fact that they'll say, oh, there's a fracture in the progressive movement? I would say, and I would deal with it by saying, hell yes, there is. I'm not with Obama who wants to do more offshore drilling. I'm not with Obama who wants to pretend he did healthcare when he didn't. And I'm definitely not with Obama who pretends that he did financial reform when they're not going to do a lick of financial reform. Yes, I'm on Obama's left, and Obama's not a progressive, okay? He's a little center-right, which, back in the day might have been okay, but not today. And so, yes, there's a fracture, no question. If you don't have that fracture, you're in a lot of trouble. Because if you're waiting on Obama to solve an issue, you're waiting on these Democrats to solve an issue, good luck.
My second question, the protesters during Speaker Pelosi's speech, I wrote about this a few months ago, and I'm wondering if you could speak to, on the list of things that got left out of healthcare reform, where would you rank that legislation?
What's the question?
The Community Choice Act protesters, where would you rank that legislation in terms of the things that got left out of the healthcare reform bill? Everybody says, it's a worthy law, but really, on the list of things that got left out, where do you rank that in terms of importance?
Look, it's totally honest, and I said this earlier to some folks that was gathering, I don't know the details of the Community Choice Act well enough, and I couldn't even tell which side those protesters were on, hence the least effective protest of all time. But to me, the reason we didn't really do healthcare reform is because we didn't change the underlying structure. It always comes back to the same thing. Incentives, disincentives, structure. And the structure is the same. You pay private insurance can raise the rates at any time that they like. If you have that underlying structure, you're never going to win. You'll lose on all the little issues. And eventually there's going to be a rebellion where people say, yeah, that's all great, but I can't pay my bills.
All the things you bring up are really important points, and we do need to use the primary system to hold accountable those who aren't doing the right thing. But we also need to be rewarding those who do, and that's not just fundraising. I've found that when I'm on the Hill doing work, advocating for the causes I believe in,
we, at least, DFA and probably other communities, have gotten to the point where we are providing folks in Congress with some level of information and policy input right now. This started a few years ago. We used to have actually part of our training program was how to have a meeting with an elected official. And it was extremely detailed in that way. And that actually got started when we were doing work on the Social Security thing in 2005. And I've been in a couple of those meetings, and they're pretty darn good. There's a lot of good exchange. And while they don't necessarily change everybody's vote, the folks that are running these meetings are becoming sources of information and sources of credible sources of policy input. But we do, to your point, have a long way to go. The fact is that with us working on all these different issues right now, and the fact that the insurance lobbyists are over there in Health and Human Services giving their input, simply because there isn't enough capacity for people to be into the experts, the folks we need. I don't mean just from TFA. I mean, the doctors groups that were so valuable and input in this public option and thing, the single payer folks, all of these folks, the insurance experts, we're not there yet. We need to have a lot more of that. And I'm not sure exactly you can throw people into this, but that's not a speedy process. And coalescing those folks is another little project probably worth taking a look at in a very short period of time.
Yeah, to your point, to Jim's point as well, we're tremendously outnumbered. At the group, we just began our Hill program, and we have a dedicated staffer who goes and meets with people, meets with members and develops alliances. But you're right, we're going to be outnumbered 101 every time we step into those offices. But let's not forget also the power that we do have through grassroots membership, but that's a lobbying arm as well. And the petitions that we do, the phone calls that we do, that we organize members to do, has an effect. We've seen members of Congress in this session go in with our petitions in hand and quote the number of folks that have co-signed the legislation or backed up what they're working on. That's something that we can continue to do. But you're right, like we are going to need a tremendous amount more resources.
Yeah, and we clearly have to have both an inside game and an outside game. We spend a lot of time talking about the outside game, and frankly, not enough time talking about the inside game. The C4 advocacy organization piece of what I run has done things like we put together meetings in DC where we brought people from the PCCC and DFA and a number of other organizations in with members of Congress and staff to try to help them understand how they can do more on the inside. In fact, they stole one of my staffers to run their health program. It's fine. It was a good thing. It's a good thing. But we do not have enough, progressives do not have enough inside infrastructure, and that is, in fact, an enormous problem. I think that there's broad agreement among all of us who are working on this problem, that that's a big piece of the problem. We don't have the inside infrastructure. We haven't taken the time to build it, and we have to figure out how we're going to create it.
You mentioned the power of the NRA, and I think that's because they're a single issue group. And I think the single issue at the heart of all of this is the evil of money and the politics of people for sale. And I think the litmus test for progressive candidates should be they're working for campaign finance for first of all things, because that's at the heart of all of this.
Here. That's a great idea, and let me just also make sure that everybody knows we have a tremendous opportunity in front of us right here, even in this town. There is a fair election bill that is in Congress. It has 150 sponsors. I'm proud to say that one of the leaders of it happens to be a congressperson from Connecticut named John Larson. And in it is a mechanism for public financing for federal elections. And the fact is that we are at the point right now where we can make this happen. If we can get not that many more sponsors on this bill, we can get it to the floor. And there is no better time than now, because there's no better electorate that is more angry about the amount of money in politics from both the left and the right as there has been today. So call your congressperson and tell them to sign out of this bill if they already haven't, because it's an opportunity that's in front of us right now.
Campaign finance reform is not an easy fix. There's a lot of issues at play. It's not just the public financing. Not all, but at least 50% of the staffers that work in the Hill then become lobbyists, and that doesn't get addressed in public financing. They have this incentive system, again, to play ball, and they know that if they write a terrible financial report, reform bill that they'll get hired by the banks and the lobbyists afterwards. So it's a very long battle. Having said that, you're 100% right. Let me triple down on what Jim was saying. Campaign finance reform, you know what, I'll go over the top. It's the only issue, okay? Because until you fix that, and until you fix the structure, you're going to lose on every other issue. That's why we lost, in my opinion, on healthcare. That's why we're definitely going to lose on financial reform. That's why I appear to be a pessimist, because I think this town is so corrupt, and we're going to lose on every issue. But don't get me wrong, I'm a long-term optimist. I think we're going to fight that battle. I think we're going to win that battle, partly because things are going to go so bad that we're going to have the senior citizens, you know, walking to Washington with cat food, and then that's when we have to be ready to fight, and we have to be ready to do this structural change that we're talking about. And campaign finance reform is at the very heart of it, so people actually get their democracy back.
I want to just very briefly build on something that Jim just said, which is that there's actually anger on both the left and the right about the level of corporate capture of the government and that the folks who are supposed to be representing us in Washington, D.C. There is a rare opportunity here. And you will hear a lot of the mainstream media say one of two things. This is an anti-democratic year, which is not true according to polling, or this is an anti-incumbent year, which is also not objectively true. We have some really interesting incumbents who are polling much better than we would think they would. What this is an anti-corporate sellout year on both the left and the right. And to make sure that people understand that and that the elected officials or potential candidates you're dealing with understand that this is on both the left and the right. The people of this country are rising up and saying, you are supposed to be representing us, not BP, not Aetna Insurance, not, Goldman Sachs. Represent us, the people.
That's such a great point. Look, the right wing here is a natural ally for us. Maybe the only case where they are. Because they're also sick to death of it. Why do you think Bob Bennett lost in Utah? They think he has the virus. They're right. He does have the virus. And so do our guys. And because I can't wait to get back to an America where we have real ideological debates. Pro-life, pro-choice. Great. Let's have that debate. Okay? We don't have those debates anymore. We have, all right, who's going to sell out to Goldman Sachs quicker? Is it you or me? No. They literally did that. A couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, where they went down, both the Democrats and the Republicans went down to Wall Street and said, no, I promise I'll kiss your ass better than the other guy. and the Republicans, the voters are sick of it too. That's part of the reason why they have the Tea Parties. The corporations do a brilliant job of misdirecting them. We've got to help them to get strong and healthy enough to be able to have real ideological fights with us, rather than us both getting roped.
I'd like to make one more comment on the Deficit Commission. Lee Gardner just wrote a very good article in Nation magazine where he quoted Obama saying, well, better we Democrats cut Social Security than let the Republicans slash and burn. And I also want to make a comment on my Congresswoman, Carol Shea Porter. She refuses to take any PAC money and any corporate money. And she got into Congress by grassroots fundraising, $10, $20 at a time, and she's remained faithful to that in her future.
Wait, let me make a comment on what you're saying. That's what I do. I think you're right, and I think we can do Obama without Obama, okay? We can do online fundraising as Obama did, and we don't need him to do it. And so your example is a great one. I totally disagree with that article in The Nation. That's, how we always do, oh, no, they're going to kill Social Security, so let's cut it for them. No, don't cut it for them, fight them. And, these deficit hawks, my ass, they're deficit hawks. I'm a deficit hawk. I'm a long-time deficit hawk. You're going to be a real deficit hawk? Prove it to me. Call it war funding. Right. Okay? Cut the Pentagon. Let me see where your deficit hawkness is, right? They're lying. They don't want to cut any of that. As Darcy said, hedge funds, the richest people in the world, they're not bad guys. I have some friends who are in hedge. Some of my best friends are in but why are we, I don't care if they're good or bad guys, why are we taxing them at 15% 15%, that's insane. You're a deficit hawk? All right, then raise the hedge fund rate to 40% taxing. Look, this country was great, and for 50 years, when our highest marginal tax rate was between 70 and 90%. Oh, the great America, the Newt Gingrich and Rush Limbaugh want to return to, had a marginal tax rate for the top bracket of 70 to 90%. Okay, so you want to be a deficit hawk? Let me see you in action. Don't give. So until they do that, I'm not having a conversation about Social Security and Medicare. I'm having a conversation about kicking their ass.
A quick statement and then a question for you guys. The quick statement is you talked about the Overton window, Cenk. You know, the Tea Party is moving the Republicans to the right. We want to move the Democrats to the left. Just a quick observation. They're moving their party to very unpopular positions with independents and the general public. We want to move this party to positions that are very popular, according to polling. 70% for public options, 72% for strong reform of the banking system. So just an observation there. And then my question is this. We, with the Campaign for America's Future, we're handing today 50,000 names on a petition to televise, truly televise the process for financial reform negotiations between the House and Senate. True, not just pre-canned speeches after the deals are cut in the back room. I say televise the caucus meetings too. And you guys have talked primarily, and it's great work, about electoral politics and electing better members of the House and Senate and behavior mod on those who don't behave appropriately with primaries and things like that. Great work. But what do you think organizations like yours or like us should be doing to get into the process, too, to make it more transparent? Because we saw in financial reform, even if some Republicans have to vote in public on breaking up the big banks or a local rule or whatever, they'll come around. So transparency is important. What are you guys doing there?
Transparency is incredibly important. One of the things that actually worked relatively well, at least as a baby step in the right direction, during the healthcare fight, was that we were able to open up more of the internal mechanics of Congress in ways that activists with the DFA, the PCCC, and Move On could understand so that they could provide input at the right times. And in the most constructive ways. We haven't done remotely enough of that. I mean, I think, watching the way a bill actually goes, from end to end through Congress, about 6% of that is visible to the public. And the other 94% is completely opaque, black box, can't see it. Sometimes because they hold these hearings and they're not televised, they're not recorded, they're not streamed, they're not available anywhere, the transcripts aren't available. So stuff that you would think would be low-hanging fruit isn't, and sometimes because an enormous amount of negotiation takes place behind the scenes. So I think that transparency is, in fact, a huge piece of what needs to happen, both in terms of the legislative process and in terms of what individual members of Congress are doing. When I was a candidate, there was a pledge that I signed with the Sunlight Foundation, which is a big transparency advocate for Congress, that said that I would post on my website, if I were to win, the name of every lobbyist I or any staff member met with within 24 hours of the meeting, and the amount of any earmark I would ever ask for and what it would be allocated to within 24 hours of asking for it, whether or not it eventually got granted, so that the voters I was supposed to be representing could hold me accountable for what I was actually doing. And we need a whole lot more of that.
My name is Tim Wheeler, and I'm from Washington State. We came close to electing you to the U.S. Congress. We're very sorry we did not succeed in that. But I've been around long enough to know that we've come a long way. We've come a very long way since Reagan was elected. The biggest sector of the House now is, I think they call it the Quad Caucus. The Progressive Caucus, the Black Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, the Women's Caucus, working together. And it seems to me that it's imperative that, as you put it, that we not throw the baby out with the bath. we have to stay focused on this, and I think the danger is that people get so angry, and understandably angry, that the Congress and the administration is not measuring up to what the need is. But the danger is that we become so frustrated that we don't go out and vote next fall, and then we fall back. There is an actual danger that the Republicans could regain a majority control of the House and Senate. And it seems to me that the challenge of this group of people is not to lose sight of the need to win in November. And if we're going to lose small and not lose big. I mean, to me, it would be a disaster if the Republicans were to win majority control of the House and Senate.
So, agreed. I think that there is something that I can safely say all four people up here and the organizations we represent agree on, which is that the correct answer is to fight harder. To walk away, to take our balls and go home is the single most counterproductive thing it would be possible for progressives to do at this point.
The other thing is, I want to actually take a page out of, doing this, the General Electric annual report, which was Jack Welch's last report. And I remember, I'll never forget this paragraph that it said when they asked, what kind of a company are we? And it talked about aspiring to have employees who were empowered to take risks, empowered to run their jobs as their own business. And I remember thinking about, why isn't the Democratic Party like this? Why aren't we, instead of trying to figure out who's the most electable and clear the primary field and dumb down dissent here and there, why aren't we just simply embracing this? It's just an attitude shift. It doesn't take money, it doesn't take structure, it doesn't take anything more than for us to decide that in order to grow, in order to win, which is equally as important to me, we need to be the party that empowers, and that will make us the party that's in power, instead of doing it the old way. This isn't some petty organized crime machine in Chicago anymore. This is a real grown-up issue where we're facing big-time challenges against an electorate that's a lot smarter than people give them credit for. And in order to demonstrate that we can do this and that we're capable of governing, we have to demonstrate that we're perfectly comfortable and secure in ourselves to offer voters real choices and say that you are going to decide the direction that we're going to take in this country, and we're willing to be the coalition party that accommodates that. And I think we're getting there. I really do. I know, there's a doubt in the extent that that's going on, but every time we have this thing, and again, Walter's already shown it, Joe Sestak showed it in Pennsylvania, and Elaine Marshall is going to show it in July, where the leadership here decided, well, here's a person that's more electable, and this woman, who has been a great Secretary of State for 4 terms, beat Richard Petty in a race in North Carolina. If you can beat him in North Carolina, you can beat anybody. And it was shunned aside. And our voters and our members said no. And they want this choice. And that contest, even in and of itself, is actually energizing the voters in North Carolina. Just as Pennsylvania did, just as Arkansas is doing. So it's an attitude shift as much as anything else. But we've got to say, we're going to embrace this thing instead of worrying about who's going to be in charge and where everybody's going to be herded and who's electable and who isn't.
I want to add something, and I'm really glad you made that point, because I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm saying. You have to vote, okay? And it doesn't matter if you think the 2 options suck. Okay, I'm not an idealist. I'm a practical guy. We want to change the structure because that's going to get us wins, practically speaking, down the road. But as we're fighting the long-term fight, we have to continue to fight the short-term fight. And so, given, it's a choice between 2 evils. Yeah, it's politics. I get it, right? And I'm going to take the lesser evil every time as I fight for a better system, right, in the long term. And that's where the primaries are even more important. So whenever you hear Democratic leadership talking about, primaries are not a good thing, clear the field, it's them covering their ass. They don't want a primary, okay? Primaries are a great thing. They're called democracy. And it's most important to vote in a primary because that's your one chance for change. But by the time you get to the general election, if your blank check is your only choice, you're going to have to vote for her because the Republican's going to be worse. So don't wait till that. Make sure you do a primary so you can get a candidate you actually believe in.
And the residual effects of this thing are interesting. In 2006, when Ned Lamont and Joe Lieberman were running against each other for the primary for Senate, this was a vote about the war in Iraq. 30,000 people registered for being independents or for being Republicans, registered into the Democratic Party so that they could be part of this. And it was an seminal primary victory for Ned. It changed the tone of this election. And even though Joe actually ended up being in the Senate, Joe Courtney won his race for Congress by 89 votes. Don't think he doesn't forget those 30,000 people every day when he gets up and goes to work in Congress. And he's pretty darn good. And Chris Murphy, who's also pretty darn good, won his election by a few thousand votes, and he hasn't forgotten that either. So it has a much wider effect than just a simple election that's at hand at the moment.
And I would just add, we have to give people a reason to be excited. If we take the pessimistic view, and we could have done this in Arkansas and say, there is no way that anybody can challenge Glenn Youngkin, that's such a shame, then we wouldn't have what we have today. And when we, I think, I don't know if you can say this as well, Jim, but when Pedro got involved with the altar race, many people laughed at us for even doing it. And we hopefully built an operation there that will win today. But I want to give you two other examples of things that are going on electorally across the country that the candidates we're looking at. Up in Rhode Island, there is a state representative named David Siegel, who has a tremendous grassroots following, is a fantastic progressive, and he's up against a very, very, very well-financed opponent, the mayor of the province. And people looked at us again and said, why are you doing this? This is ridiculous. This is beyond an uphill battle. And we went there and said, I was just up and around for 5 weeks, and helped him build the first groundwork of this operation. And in 1 month, we have raised $100,000 just from small dollar online contributions. And they're building a team there, a professional team. And I think it's one of those cases where if you say this can't be done, and you look at the conventional wisdom, then you never create a new space for something to be possible.
All right, last one on that is that we have a terrific opportunity ahead. Don't lose track of what's going on across the country. What was really daunting in the past, and why they always thought this was unrealistic, was because incumbency has such an enormous advantage. They have name recognition, they have money, they have this, they have that, and that's what they tell you can't beat the incumbents. Now that it's turning on its head, I wish we had mobilized earlier for 2010 primaries, but I think that opportunity is still going to be there for 2012 and 2014. Now incumbency is a disadvantage. So that opens up the whole system. Get everybody to run. Get your aunt and your uncle and your grandma to run in Democratic primaries. We have a fantastic opportunity in 2012 and 2014. You shouldn't let these guys sleep for the next 4 years. You should give them that much work.
Nebraska and Montana, folks, let it happen. Speaker, is some of the newer members of Congress taking real meaningful positions of responsibility, and in some cases senior positions of responsibility. And I think that is terrific. I think it is, if that is a trend that continues, we're not going to have that much of a problem with it in the House. Clearly, we have a huge problem with how the leaders are picked in the United States Senate, in the Democratic caucus, and who is running with it, and which is why we do have people who are out of touch running committees who should not be running those committees.
So just to add to that, I agree that in the House actually we have much less of a problem than in the Senate. We have a progressive Speaker of the House, 11 of 21 Senate. We have to fix their procedures, we have to fix how they choose leadership, and we have to fix the degree to which they've been captured by large corporations. And with that, I think we're basically out of time. So thank you all for coming. Have a lovely rest of the conference.